Of all the issues facing the human race, the supply of food is the most critical. Yet, we take it for granted.
As the world becomes more globalized, we've come to expect food on tap. We ship food by plane and boat across the planet, burning fossil fuel in the process. Global warming or geopolitical events could at any time interrupt the free flow of food around the world.
So here's the problem. Over 60% of all of the food that we eat in Ireland is imported. So if anything happens globally to halt the supply of food imports to Ireland, we have less than 1 week's supply on our shelves or in our stores of most commodities. So what happens then? It's time we woke up.
Despite our success in agriculture, we still import between 60 and 70% of the food we eat. Bringing raspberries from Israel, meat from South America, chickens from Asia is harming our planet. Every mile this food travels, particularly by air, contributes to climate change, which is affecting the production of food globally. In recent years, we've seen catastrophic droughts in Africa and China. Hurricanes greater in force than ever previously recorded have hit Asia, while severe temperature spikes in the US have decimated yields of essential foods like barley, wheat and potatoes. It's unsustainable, and Ireland, an island nation, is more exposed than most.
We've seen a couple of big shocks over the last few years, the horse meat scandal and the pig meat scandal a few years ago and so on, how vulnerable we are because this really, really complex system with so many sort of spokes in the wheel that when one of those goes wrong, the whole thing falls apart.
You must have a local supply chain, because if you get a major climate event or a war or an earthquake and we suddenly had to feed ourselves, we would have a big problem. We would probably only have about 2 weeks' supply of consumer foods in this country.
Our food chain is broken. We've got this bizarre situation in Ireland where we have a fantastic agriculture system. We're producing enough food every single year to feed about 34 million people, which is, 6-7 times our population. And yet, for some strange reason, we're still importing €5 billion worth of food. So you've got container ships passing each other in the Irish Sea. Some of them are sending food out, some of them bringing the exact same type of food in.
We're very favoured by nature. We have a wonderful growing climate and all of that, but still we import 70% of our food, and only 2% of the food that people eat is actually local. So in a way, what we need to do is to take back the power over our food choices.
Replacing imports by growing more food at home will not only help the environment, it will benefit Irish farmers and the economy as a whole.
A lot of the industries that we have that are foreign direct investment in Ireland, their supply chain is elsewhere. So, when they grow, the Irish economy doesn't grow. Whereas food and agriculture is deeply embedded, buys its inputs in the Irish economy. And therefore, when there's growth there, there's Irish economy growth. So this is really a huge opportunity for Ireland.
Different kinds of food have different environmental impacts. While farmers are working to reduce pollution, Irish beef currently generates 25 kilos of CO2 per kilogram of meat. Despite producing the world's best beef, Ireland imports 30,000 tonnes of meat every year, further increasing emissions. In comparison, fish from Irish oceans, local chicken and homegrown fruit and veg are far less carbon intensive. By being more conscious of the environmental impact of the food we eat when we shop, we can have a dramatic impact on our planet.
The government have given over the responsibility for feeding the people to supermarkets. That's what's happened. And there's no market. They have the whole market. Only farmers' market started up 10 years ago. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Jimmy grows and processes organic beef and also sources products from several farmers and sells them on the internet and in farmers' markets around the country. Cheese, lamb, beef, eggs and sausages, all homemade, organic, handcrafted and fully Irish. It's the kind of food we would all eat if we could get it. Jimmy's operation is both economically and environmentally sustainable. He doesn't use chemical fertiliser or pesticides on his land. And, like some farmers in Ireland, he is working hard to reduce the per kilo CO2 emissions of the beef he produces. Many of us think that pure organic food has to be expensive. Well, in Jimmy's case, it isn't. His own beef sells for less per kilo than its equivalent in the supermarkets.
And the people that you're selling it to, do they appreciate your food and the organic?
Oh yeah, we've got to have great customers at the market, and they're not coming back because they like me. You know, they're coming back because they like the produce we're selling.
Buying food from local producers like Jimmy will reduce imports. It will also keep our money in the local community. At present, we're giving €6 billion of our hard-earned cash to the supermarkets, and much of that is leaving Ireland's shores.
At the moment, our food choices are really in the hands of 4 or 5 multinational companies, and so in a way we need to take back the power over what we eat and the choices we make and actually become more and more self-sufficient.
The supermarkets say that many of their products cannot be sourced in Ireland, but take a trip to your local farmer's market and you'll find a wonderful range of home-produced food. Mushroom varieties, smoked fish, delicious cheeses, local fresh meats, vegetables and fruit, all direct from source. There's no horse meat scandal here.
I think the farmers' markets are enormously important. You buy directly from the farmer or the food producer, you know exactly how the food is produced, where it comes from, and that's incredibly important. You're putting the money back into your own locality, and you really are eating with the seasons because what's on the stalls is fresh, it's what's in season, it's been grown at that time.
Noreen, you're specialising in pig food here. All bacon and everything here, rashers. Where is it all grown?
Our pig farm is just 6 miles here from Middleton, and all our pigs are born on our own farm, and all the meat we use just comes from all our own pigs. And then the money that we bring in at the farmers' market here, we spend here locally in Middleton as well. So it's all staying within the community. And it's local people that are buying from us week in, week out, and they're supporting us.
And why wouldn't you sell it in the supermarket, for example?
They would certainly have a huge margin from it. It wouldn't be sustainable for us. It just wouldn't work.
For local Irish producers to become more competitive and keep costs down, they need more market share. But at present, most are shut out by our supermarket system.
The reality is that if you take a fresh food product, 99% of all the value add and production costs takes place between the farmer and the processor, and yet they would get less than half of the final retail price on the product. Retailer adds a shelf, just makes the shelf available, and he gets at least 50% of all the money made on the products.
There's a relentless pressure to drive down the price of food, and in many cases it's totally below an economic level. Many farmers and food producers are simply not being paid enough to produce the nourishing, wholesome food that we say we want and we absolutely need for our health.
This situation means that many small Irish food producers find their margins so squeezed that they simply can't afford to produce food for the wider Irish market.
There's been cuckoo economics applied to supply chains that don't take into account that a food supply chain, if it isn't sustained, just disappears, and therefore you starve. It's about looking at this on a much more balanced basis. It's about bringing in legislation on fair trade that says, on the one hand, we've allowed a situation where 3 retailers in Ireland control between 80 and 90% of our food spending. That's huge control. The quid pro quo for that has to be a much fairer and balanced relationship with the supply chain, because we can't afford for the supply chain to disappear.
I feel we're very exposed, and our governments seem to think that, oh, this is okay, let the supermarkets have the responsibility for feeding the people. It's like letting the banks, what they've done, the economic system. Food is more important than the money system. Food is the most important system. So there has to be controls there. You know, like supermarkets, there should be a code of practice for dealing with their suppliers. You know, it's too important, food is, I feel anyway.
Not so long ago, Irish people grew nearly everything we ate. Then, the convenience of supermarkets and changing lifestyle patterns caused us to lose contact with the source of our food. Today, 85% of the food we eat is purchased in supermarkets. They control the market.
Generally, the problem with supermarkets is that there is massive difficulty in getting access to markets, you know, and an awful lot of these small producers can't even talk about it, because if they do talk about it publicly, they feel very vulnerable that they'll be cut off by the big supermarket chains, you know. How are we going to tackle this massive problem? You go to France or go to Austria, to Sweden, Germany, any of these countries, and all local brands are proudly shown in all of the supermarkets. You know, that doesn't seem to be the case with the big supermarket chains in Ireland that control 85% of the distribution.
Well, I think it's different within SuperValu. You know, I think we do try and feature local producers to the best of our ability. You know, as I said to you earlier, in our store here, we would have a section where we would just feature local product, you know, and we would use display areas to try and assist any of these people, you know, to grow and develop them. Take, for example, if down there, you know, in terms of some of the produce, we're working with a local producer, Green Growers, based in North Dublin, who are a small collective of smaller producers producing Irish, you know, fruit and vegetables, so we'd work with them. We use their product in our kitchen. We've got a kitchen down below employing about 10 people now, a brand that didn't exist for us 2 years ago. We're producing all our own meals here for sale to the public using Irish produce, you know, so using Irish meats, and that's you know, in replacement of, say, importing those products or manufacturing them somewhere else in the world.
SuperValu, like all the major supermarket chains in Ireland, are responding to the demands of the customer. A recent Board Bia survey found that 75% of us prefer buying Irish. This demand has led supermarkets to make a big deal about sourcing Irish food, and that's great. But they could go much further. A guaranteed fair price system for local produce exists in many European countries. We need the same thing in Ireland. We also need a more transparent and traceable labelling system, which clearly distinguishes between products that are entirely home produced and products that have only been packed in Ireland. These changes will create more local productive jobs and help reduce our impact on the environment. In recent years, Irish people have been tuning into food like never before. The signs can be seen throughout the country. Michael Kelly runs GIY Ireland, which has seen participants increase from 100 people to 50,000 in less than a decade.
Our basic idea was that, you know, as a nation, we've more or less forgotten those food growing skills that we would have taken for granted, you know, 20 or 30 years ago. So our idea was just bring people together in groups and projects. They can share knowledge, share ideas and so on to help each other get those skills again. And, you know, sometimes urban growing like we're seeing here is kind of dismissed as, you know, sure, what difference is that going to make? You know, it's not you can't produce enough in a city to feed a city. And our point is that in the food empathy context, it's the whole ball game. If we can get people understanding where their food comes from, then when they do go to the food chain, to the supermarket or the farmer's market, they're making different decisions because of their food empathy.
The idea of picking your own things. You go into your house, wash it off, and in a half an hour you're sitting to eat something that has just come out of the ground. There's nothing better.
Skills are freedom, basically. If we can cook, if we can grow, etc., we're much freer. We're in control of what we eat.
I think the future of the food chain necessarily has to be, you know, smaller, far more local, far more homegrown. You know, the combination of the climate changes that are coming down the track are going to force this on us probably, and you know, keep all that money that we need to in the economy flushing around locally as opposed to, you know, going out of the country.
How was that?
There's another option to consider, a competitor to the supermarket system. I'm beginning to realise that a food co-op network run by farmers and local consumers could distribute locally produced food regionally and nationally in an effective and economic way.
I've been in France and I see they have a type of cooperative movement out there, Uniferm they call it. And that to me is what we need. That's my next step if I can get it going. You could say farming, maybe go in and bring in your produce and have someone running it. Genuine local produce.
A new national consumer co-op system would see the establishment of farm shops in major towns and cities. The English market in Cork offers a glimpse of the kind of place I believe we could have throughout Ireland. I couldn't think of anything better than to source local food whenever I wanted.
Now, would that have a Cork accent?
I suppose there
Could it talk with a Cork accent?
Well, you were here about an hour ago now when he was alive.
Right,
He'd have probably
okay.
said, yeah, how's it going, boy?
Insisting on more local products in supermarkets, consuming foods homegrown in season, shopping locally direct from producers. All of this will help increase the long-term security of our food supplies. But is there more we could do? With our mild oceanic climate, there is a list of food that just can't be grown here. But with the help of science, that list may be shortening. During the Second World War, when food imports from abroad came to a virtual standstill, the farmers of North County Dublin came to the rescue. They escalated production and fed the nation. Well, today, they're once again becoming an important part of Ireland's food security solution.
My father built the first glass house in Rush back, I don't know, it was 1930 something. But I remember when we had 50 ton of tomatoes, and we got to 55, we thought we could never go any better. And then we got to 60 ton an acre.
50 tonnes an acre then?
Yeah, it was then. That was a superb crop
now
then.
You're at 250?
50 ton an acre, yeah.
Really?
Using the latest scientific technologies in their hydroponic greenhouses, the Foley family have squeezed market share from the Dutch.
It's all vine tomatoes, all grown for local supermarket, Irish supermarkets. Most of them, we supply them with vine tomatoes.
Matt's operation relies on science. He doesn't use soil to grow the tomatoes. Instead, the vines are planted in rockwool, like the stuff we use for insulating our homes. The exact amount of water and nutrients that each plant requires are fed by pipes to the roots.
You're like a doctor here, really, or a scientist, are you not?
It's high science. The plant gets exactly what it needs. It doesn't get any more than it needs. These are all the way forward, because what we are actually talking about, we're talking about producing food for big populations of people in the future.
According to the UN's Population Division, by 2050, around 70% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. A revolutionary solution to providing food for these growing urban populations is vertical farming. This innovative system optimizes the amount of energy, space, and water needed to grow food. Using LED lighting, they can artificially lengthen both the day and the growing season, increasing productivity substantially. I decided to visit Keelings, one of Ireland's biggest growers, to see what they think the future will look like. Keelings import and grow a huge range of food, but they're also experimenting with ways to reduce the amount they import. In 2013 alone, as part of a new project, they grew 9 million peppers.
How big is this, Andrew?
5 hectares of glass here, 50,000 square meters. And we're just at the stage of finishing one crop, cleaning up the whole glasshouse, and then we'll plant the crop again here in January. This will be peppers.
So there's still, you can see still a few of them here.
These are not the greatest example of what we produce because of the size. This is really just the waste that was left on the plant. But normally our peppers would be about 4 times the size of what you've got in your hands there.
These are crops that you typically get in Mediterranean, aren't they?
Yeah, its natural environment would be places like Mexico.
Right, so really our climate, we can grow them under these conditions, yeah, very well.
Yes, but very much an artificial climate. We have to create the climate for them. So we'd be targeting temperatures in here during the growing of between about 18.5 and about 22 degrees Celsius.
Do you mind if I eat this?
Good.
Lovely to think we can grow these at this time of the year in Ireland.
The majority of what we produce goes into supermarkets.
Do you think supermarkets are being fair to the producers?
I think what's very important for the retailers is to give commitments, more longer-term commitments, because a lot of the growers are making investments that are going to be for over the next 10, 15 years, and it is important that all of the retailers support longer-term investments, and that's where we'll get the opportunity to produce more and more Irish produce once we get those commitments.
And if you look at then the sustainability of food, if we grow food in Ireland compared to importing it long distances, what's the difference in food miles?
Yeah, well, for ourselves, we've probably replaced anything between 700 and 1 million food miles, because previously we were bringing product from Spain, from Holland, from the States. So we've replaced a huge amount of food miles. So it's made a massive difference from that perspective.
How much energy gets used in growing all of these crops here?
We're using a huge amount of energy, but what we are doing is we've installed a combined heat and power unit, and what that does is we burn natural gas. That generates electricity, which we use in all of our facilities to refrigerate our stores, and then also that excess electricity we have, we're selling then to the grid. And then in addition to that, we're producing excess heat, and that heat goes into the glass houses to make sure the crops are getting the temperatures they need. And then in addition to that, the crops are using the CO2 that's produced. And we also then have a screening system in our glass houses, which when it's cold at night, it basically closes over and keeps the heat in, and that reduces usage by 20–30%. And we've even done things in the past few years reducing packaging. So instead of having a plastic lid, we have a film. Right. So it's any opportunity you get, it does make sense to be sustainable and create opportunities to reduce emissions. But I'd be very excited about the future. I still think we can, over the next 10 years, between 50 and 100% growth in terms of Irish production. The opportunity is still there, and we're very lucky. Irish consumers want to support Irish grown produce. There's a lot of emotion attached to it, and it's fantastic.
Growing food out of season and forcing longer growing days can require substantial energy input. We have to weigh up whether growing intensively like this is environmentally responsible. Sometimes we will have to accept that it's better to import certain foods. Oranges and pineapples, which can be transported slowly by ship, will always be better grown in hot climates. But we may also have to accept that delicate foods like blueberries and raspberries, which require more environmentally damaging air freight to import, can only be available during the summer when they can be grown in Ireland. As climate change increases, we all need to become more aware. Question everything and ask yourself, is what I'm eating really doing its best for me, my family, my community, and the planet?
Buying more Irish products will create a better environment for the production of quality Irish food products. It will have a dramatic effect on our local economies and at the same time reduce our impacts on the global climate. And of course, we can enjoy ourselves when we're doing it too. Lovely.